Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social slime, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air. Fuck them back, it's only for they war. They shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one lives countries. Lie to your face, fight and die. Cause God forgives. Selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line. Lower classes, social slide, they don't matter. Genocide, sick from water, sick from air. Making money, they don't care. See the shit, force of bear. Fuck them back, that's only fair. They bomb, they shoot, they kill, they massacre, rape. They burn the kids, no one leaves countries. Lie to your face, fight and die, cause God forgives. Yeah. Coming back around again.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Ron Stevens. This is Rock the Boat right here on UCY.TV, the best little network on the whole wide internet. Today's April the 20th, 2017, and it had rained like a dog here today. But that'll help green things up. The grass is growing good. The leaves are starting to bud. And so I guess we're going to get some warm air, and I hope we get some warm air. And all this rain we got should make the flowers and everything bloom pretty quick, which would be nice. A long winter. So tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about something that's going on the east coast of Canada, which is really disgusting. But I got to take my hat off to the guy. I tried getting a hold of. I can't get a hold of him because he's in a tent. But I tried to get a hold of his wife and his dad. I haven't had any luck doing that yet. I imagine they're not home much. But this is another case of somebody that's principled, a principled man, knows right from wrong. And, people have had Michael Schmidt, the raw milk farmer, on the show a few times. And Michael did the same thing a bunch of years back. He went on a hunger strike. I forget. It was a long one. It was very long. I forget how many. That was really long, that one. And he was prepared to die. He wanted a meeting with the premier of the province, Dalton McGuinty, at the time, to try and get this sorted out, this milk problem, so that people could drink the milk. Michael is a very principled man, and he said he was prepared to die if he didn't get his meeting. Some people might look at that as crazy, but this is what it takes. This is, you're going to change something. You gotta get up on the front line there and deal with it. The corruption is so thick in our nations. It's really pathetic. Anyways, this story here is about a fisherman. And I guess he's some reality show as well. We'll get to that anyways. It says he's prepared to die on hunger strike over Ottawa's mismanagement of the fishery. And this is a huge problem because everything's mismanaged because everything's controlled by. Anyways, this is from St. John's, Newfoundland, but the town they live in is called Twillingate. That took me a while to. I was putting the names in last night and making some phone calls, and I was put it in for St. John's, but I got a lady who's a Gillette as well, and very nice lady, 57-year-old lady. We had a nice chat, not who I was looking for, but we had a nice chat about what's going on the East Coast and how they're shutting down all the small villages and so on and so forth. Same thing I told her they're doing here in Ontario and everywhere else in the country as they attempt to rewild and drive people out of where they want to live. And so anyways, this story is about Richard Gillette. Says he's a bull of a man when hands that make a bottle of water he's holding look small. He's thick-necked, stands about 6 feet, and weighs 250 before he stopped eating a week ago. On Wednesday, this tough guy, Newfoundland fisherman, known for his 3 seasons on the reality show Cold Water Cowboys, fought back tears outside the federal fisheries headquarters in St. John. Now, I know the fishermen raided that thing a bit ago, and they're ticked right off, as they should be. But he says, I'm prepared to go as far as I have to go. He started a hunger strike last Thursday, so that's a week today, and has slept in a tent here in freezing temperatures and biting winds every night since. He holds a slushy bottle of urine, the only toilet he needs on a water-only diet. Gillette is protesting, or Gillette, I guess they call it there. It's pronounced Gillette there. Is protesting what he says is dire mismanagement of stocks ranging from crab to capelin. His home is now a donated canvas Girl Guides tent, cook's tent with a small wood stove in the corner for warmth. Gillette said he will die if he has to. It's a pledge he made repeatedly during an interview Wednesday at his parents, John and Linda, sat listening. They have been at his side, along with his wife Joyce, and supporters who dropped by, offering everything from firewood to blankets. His demands include a teleconference with Federal Fisheries Minister Dominic LeBlanc and an independent review of science and management for all provincial fish stocks. He also wants a review of the relationship between the Fish, Food, and Allied Workers Union representing harvesters in the Federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Gillette is vice president of the Federation of Independent Sea Harvesters of Newfoundland and Labrador, a splinter union group seeking certification, but he said his protest goes far beyond any political wranglings. It has really been coming to this for a long time, Gillette said, of fisheries turmoil stretching back to and beyond the ongoing commercial moratorium on northern cod that threw thousands of people out of work in '92. Now, this is important. This is really important that people understand what's going on here. This really got a whole hell of a lot to do with fish, actually. And that's why I was trying to get a hold of these people down on the East Coast. It's not about the fish. It's about control. It's about propaganda. It's about climate change. It's not really about the fish. The fish are just a mechanism to promote their propaganda. He said he decided to do something drastic last week after LeBlanc refused to meet with him and Fish NL President Ryan Cleary as they visited Ottawa. We should have had the minister's ear, even if it was only for 5 or 10 minutes. As Gillette spoke, passing drivers frequently honked in support. The fishery, he says, is a mess, and he fears that after 6 generations plying the North Atlantic in every type of weather, it could all end for his family with him. Without the fishery, he says, I'm no good. Father of 2 daughters, aged 18 and 19, and a 16-year-old son who fishes every summer with him. He took another long pause to collect himself. I'm no good to nobody if there's no fishery. Federal fisheries officials recently announced sharp cuts to shrimp and crab quotas as talks dwindle. harvesters who say they need priority access to what's left with more flexible licensing rules and more input to help monitor stocks have ramped up protests. About 50 demonstrators streamed into federal fisheries headquarters in St. John's earlier this month after kicking in the plexiglass window of a locked door. In another incident Tuesday, harvesters set fire to their own fishing gear in Port au Choix as a show of frustration. In an email statement, Kevin Anderson, Regional Director General for Fisheries Oceans Canada, said he understand it's difficult time and the department is willing to listen. It is, of course, concerning when anyone takes a course of action such as the one Mr. Gillette is pursuing, and we share the public's concern for his health. Anderson said scientific stock assessments are shared publicly and that fish harvesters are consulted. Last year's federal budget included $1.97 million over 5 years for oceans and freshwater science, creating 18 new research positions in the province alone, he said. Okay, so he spent $197 million, $197 million over 5 years to hire 18 science and research positions. It does nothing for the fishery. Nothing whatsoever for the fishery. Our fisheries management decisions are evidence-based, and their ultimate goal is to conserve our important public resources so that they are available now and for the future generations of Canadian fishers. That's UN lingo. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's straight out of the UN. Anderson and LeBlanc has been kept apprised of recent protests and Gillette's hunger strike, but spokesman Laurie Garreau said Wednesday the minister was not available to comment. Gillette's father, fisherman and author John Gillette, said his diabetic son has had past heart issues. He wants him to eat, but also stressed that he supports his push for change in fisheries and oceans. They're going to have to step up and have a captain that's going to run the ship and run it properly. It breaks my heart to see these towns, fishing villages all dying, he added. Our Newfoundland should be one of the richest provinces in Canada. Richard Gillette can't imagine a life on dry ground. Once you're a fisherman, you're always a fisherman, he says. Now, I don't know if there's any comments on this story, but I'm going to look at them, see if there are any. The problem with this whole story is it's all linked to the United Nations nonsense. Now, the reason I want to get a hold of either Richard's wife or John, his dad, or his mom, is to find out if they understand what exactly is behind all this nonsense. Now, it mentioned 1992. I remember this well, when the cod fishery died. It was overfished. We have to put a moratorium on it. And this was the same time they were pushing hard on global warming. And it was also in the 90s, 99, when Rockefeller said our window of opportunity has already begun to close. And he's absolutely correct. Only we haven't closed it. We should be closing it completely down and starting a new chapter. But I'm not sure how many people understand what this is all about. It is about control. It is about the UN sustainability. It is about global or international law. It has nothing to do with the fish. It does have to do with destroying the fishery. Oh, God, I got to open a pile of stuff to get what I'm looking for. I don't even know if there is any comments here. I got blockers on this thing, so I have to keep opening stuff in order to get by, in order to see if there are any. I don't know. This is the only paper. This is the National Post. Is the only paper I've seen this in to date. But it's bloody important because 1992, you got to understand. I don't see any comments here. 1992, you got to understand, was Rio, Agenda 21. down in Rio, Brasilio. And 1992 is the same year that they went apeshit on the cod. Now, what's the correlation between these two things? Well, the deal is that they know knowledge is power, okay? And they knew that the earth runs on cycles. Now, if you go back to I think it was 1958. Now, Rachel Carson wrote a book in 62, I think it was called Silent Spring, of which all environmentalists jumped all over. That was their new Bible. It was all about DDTs and stuff like that. And how we're destroying the planet. And all of the environmentalists, they carry around that in their back pocket. I'm serious. This was their calling card to save the planet. But you will never hear any of these environmentalists ever mention her book from 1958 called The Sea Around Us. Now that book, and most of that book, I think, is done from inserting research done by Swedes and Danes and all this kind of stuff, who were scratching their heads, going, "Where the hell did all the fish go? Where did the fish stocks go?" This was back in the 1800s, I think, late 1800s, early 1900s, whatever. And boom, the fish disappeared, just like they did on the East Coast. But they weren't overfished, they just moved. Because in that book, The Sea Around Us, it's very specific, using the research from actual fishers who were kind of wondering, why is all the ice melting and where did the fish go? And new species that weren't normally there showed up, just like the shrimp and that showed up on the East Coast. When the cod moved, it's the water changes temperature. It was the same thing on the West Coast, about the same time. Suzuki out there and the environmentalists are jumping up and down. Oh my God, we've killed the salmon stocks. You know, big hoo-ha-ha. Well, many years later, they had what they called one of the most historic salmon runs in history. Well, wait a minute, you said we killed all the salmon. But now, a bunch of years later, we got the biggest salmon run in history. How is that possible, scientist asshole? And again, I have no use for science. I have no use for scientists. I have no use for those who fund the scientists. And I have no use for those who control the universities that spit out these said scientists. These propagandized, stupid idiots that get caught up in this nonsense and never ask an intelligent question. But the fact of the matter is, the oceans run on a cycle. And even those guys who weren't scientists, really, they were just fishers trying to figure out where the hell the fish went. And they did a lot of depth sounding with thermometers and that and come up with a simple logic that, geez, the water warmed up. And fish of all species live in certain temperature ranges, just the way it is. So when the temperature changes, when it warmed, the cod went looking for colder water. Just like they did in 1992 when they closed the fishery. It had nothing to do with being overfished. It had to do with the water temperature, the deep water currents, ocean currents. And then crab and that moved in, and more crab moved in, and shrimp and that moved in. And the lady I was talking to last night, Ramona, who lives in she said she lives in the farthest outpost, as far as east as you can go in Canada, There is nowhere farther east in Canada than the little town she's in. I forget what it's called, but it's been devastated. Like her deal is, if you go any farther east, you're going to be wet. Now, the thing that's going on there now, they got so much ice, so they can't even get out in the boats. There's so much ice. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was global warming. But what we've got now is we've got the turn. Okay, the cycle's turning now. And that had a lot to do with what Rockefeller said in 99. Our window of opportunity has already begun to close because people are going to catch on to this bull that we pulled off here, this propaganda about global warming. The cycle's already started to change. And the harbors and that are packed with ice out there, according to Ramona. And they can't get out in the boats. And the other problem is that the international fishermen are not supposed to be in those waters. They're in those waters with the trawlers and that, scraping the bottom and pulling up everything they can and hightailing it out of there. This is our fishery. I was telling Ramona, maybe you're gonna have to start doing what the Danes did when England and the other countries started fishing their waters. They went out in their boats and they run them off, and they started taking pot shots at them. And this was the English fishing fleet. A little place like Denmark managed to run them out of there. And but we need to get a little more aggressive. Don't want anybody to get hurt. Just got to get more aggressive. So the cycle has begun to change. And according to Ramona, the cod are back. She says, we can go out and catch 4 or 5 foot cod like you're going out of style. But now you have the government and the science. So we have to protect the fish stocks for future generations. The fish stocks are there. And the fish stocks are fine. And this is another 100% scam against the people. And they will abuse their people. That's not their people. They don't even look at these. I mean, here's a picture of a guy in his tent sitting on what looks like I don't know if it's a grassy knoll or what the hell it is. But you can see the ice out in the water. Still froze up. Not melted. I don't see a polar bear there splashing around drowning. But it's all bull crap all the time. And so these people are suffering badly. Well, they suffer. $197 million is forked over science to continue the propaganda so that average Joe, and especially the children in the school, don't catch wind of the overall fraud that's taking place, and that's bloody unfortunate. So this is what we got. And I'm just going to stick this, where the hell did UCY go? I'm just stick this in here so that people can look at it. I haven't but I do want to get a hold of these people because I want to know if they're aware. Ramona seemed, the lady I was talking to in Newfoundland last night, seemed to be somewhat aware of what's going on with this climate change fraud, and but I just want to know if they've ever looked at the data from back whenever. It's been a long time since I posted this. Let's see what we got here. And see if I can get some dates on this stuff. I think it was 1958, pretty sure it was. why our winters are getting warmer. Let's see, is that it? I think so. But the fact is, okay, let's see. Pretty sure it was 1958. And, but the Silent Spring, was their big book that came out in 1982. This is copyright. Oh, this is a really old book. See Around is copyright 1950, 51, not 58, by Rachel Carson. So the other book, Silent Spring, came out in 62. So that's a decade. But you never hear an environmentalist ever mentioned in this book. The old timers that say are right, winters aren't what they were, and the reason may be gigantic tides deep under the sea that apparently change the climate of the whole earth. Oops-a-daisy. Uh-oh. You mean it's not CO2 that we exhale and that the plants inhale? You mean it's not man-caused? You mean it's a natural cycle? We can't have that stuff. And the beauty is, I don't know. I've talked to some environmentalists online, and they're adamant that climate change is man-made. And you mentioned Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and they get all excited about it. But they don't want to hear about this book. They don't want nothing to do with this book because it messes their whole system up, messes the whole bullshit up. The oceans come alive in one of this year's most fascinating books. The article is condensed from The Sea Around Us by Rachel Carson, a lifelong student of nature. Ms. Carson is editor-in-chief of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Day by day and season by season, the ocean dominates the world's climate. Can it also be an agent in bringing about a long period swings of climatic change that we know have occurred throughout this long history of the Earth and the alternating periods of heat and cold, of drought and flood? This is a fascinating theory that it can be. So, editor-in-chief of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's what Rachel Carson was doing when she wrote this book. The theory links events in the deep hidden places of the ocean with the cyclical changes of eliminate and their effect on human history. It was developed by the distinguished Swedish oceanographer Otto Pettersson, and I think a lot of people have heard of that guy before, whose almost century-long life closed in 1941. To review the Pettersson theory is to review also a pageant of human history, of men and nations in the control of elemental forces whose nature they never understood and whose very existence they never recognized. Pettersson's work was perhaps a natural outcome of the circumstances of his life. He was born as he died 93 years later on the shores of the Baltic, a sea of complex and wonderful hydrology, in his laboratory atop a sheer cliff overlooking the deep waters of the Gulmefjord. Instruments recorded strange phenomena in the depths of this gateway to the Baltic as the ocean water presses in toward the inland, yada, yada, yada. All that ice were to melt, which is unlikely. New York would be flooded, as shown on the left. Giant waves under the sea each day. Pettersson's instruments revealed a strong pulsing movement of that deep layer, the pressing inward of great submarine waves of moving mountains of water. The movement was strongest every 12th hour of the day, and between the 12th intervals it subsided. Okay, so we go down here. Tide effects, storms. Okay, I think we're getting closer to what we're looking for. I mean, this is all the propaganda that we're being fed now. You know, more frequent severe storms and floods. Well, what's it say here in this book from 1950? Storms and floods wreak havoc. Now, this is interesting because it has to do when I was really in school. It says warm water thaws ice. Now, they tell us about the Arctic ice and that melting. Well, the sun in the Arctic is not going to thaw anything. Warm water thaws the ice. In the years or the centuries of strong tidal force, unusual qualities of warm Atlantic water press into the Arctic Sea at deep levels, moving it under the ice. Not melting from the top, you're melting from underneath. Then thousands of square miles of ice that normally remain solidly frozen undergo partial thawing and break up. Drift ice in extraordinary volume enters the Labrador Current and is carried southward into the Atlantic. This changes the pattern of the surface circulation, which is so intimately related to the winds, the rainfall, and the air temperatures. For the drift ice then attacks the Gulf Stream south of Newfoundland and sends it on a more easterly course, deflecting the streams of warm surface water that usually bring a softening effect to the climate of Greenland, Iceland, and Northern Europe. Although the really catastrophic disturbance of the polar region come only every 18 centuries, according to Pedersen, there is also rhythmically occurring periods that fall at varying intervals, for example, every 9, 18, or 86 years. These correspond to other tidal cycles. They produce climatic variations of shorter periods and of less drastic nature. The year 1903, for instance, was memorable for its outburst of polar ice in the Arctic and for the repercussions on Scandinavian fisheries. There was a general failure of cod, herring, and other fish along the coast from Finnmarken and wherever. And the greater part of the Barents Sea was covered with pack ice up to May. The ice border approaching closer to the Finnmarken coast than ever before. Herds of Arctic seals visited these coasts, and some species of the Arctic whitefish extended their migration to the Christiania Ford and even entered into the Baltic. This outbreak of ice came in the year when Earth, Moon, and Sun were in relative position that gives a secondary maximum of the tide-producing forces. The similar constellation of 1912 was another great ice year in the Labrador Current, a year that brought the disaster of the Titanic. Now, in our own lifetime, we are witnessing a startling alteration of the climate, and it is intriguing to apply Otto Pedersen's ideas as a possible explanation. It is now established beyond question that a definite change in the Arctic climate set in about 1900, that it became astonishingly marked about 1980, and that it is now spreading into subarctic and temperate regions. The frigid top of the world is clearly warming up. Now, when I was in school as a kid, it says ships sail farther north. The trend toward a milder climate in the Arctic is perhaps most strikingly apparent in greater ease of navigation in the North Atlantic and the Arctic Sea. In 1982, for example, whatever the boat was, sailed around Josland for the first time in the history of the Arctic voyaging. And 3 years later, the Russian icebreaker Sadako went from the northern tip of Norway to 82 degrees, 41 minutes north latitude, the northernmost point ever reached by a ship under its own power. In 1940, the whole northern coast of Europe and Asia was remarkably free from ice during the summer months, and more than 100 vessels engaged in trade via the Arctic routes. In 1942, a vessel unloaded supplies at the West Greenland port during Christmas week. In almost complete winter darkness during the 40s, the season for shipping coal from West Spitsbergen ports lengthened to 7 months compared with 3 at the beginning of the century. The season when pack ice lies about Iceland became shorter in about 2 months out, by about 2 months. It was a century ago, drift ice in Russian sector of the Arctic Sea decreased by 1 million square kilometers between 1924 and 1944. And in the Laptev Sea, 2 islands of fossil ice melted away completely, their position being marked by submarine shoals. Now, this is another thing. They're telling you about global warming and, the birds, and then everything will move north to escape the heat. That's what they tell you. And this particular thing says bird and fish move poleward. Excuse me, I can't talk tonight. Activities in the non-human world also reflect the warming of the Arctic that changed habits and migrations of many fishes, birds, and land mammals, and whales. Many new birds are appearing in far northern lands for the first time in our records. Some high Arctic forms, which thrive in cold climates, have shown their distaste for the warmer temperatures by visiting Greenland in decreasing numbers. Yada, yada, yada. Glaciers are receding. And this is all it's all based on evidence from a long time ago. Now, the idea of the global warming, and they don't want to say that the sun had anything to do with it, but this is when we had the lineup with the solar maximus and the sea temperatures, the same basic time frame, lined up on each other. And it did get hot. I remember in the 80s, late 80s and that, I was running a construction site. And mid 80s to late 80s. And I mean, we'd get in the trucks and turn on the radio and it'd go, global warming, right? Man-made global warming. It was all over the place. And trust me, it was some freaking hot. We worked in that crap, and I had some people a lot of days we had to shut down at noon. Start early and get out of there at lunch because you couldn't work. It was just nasty hot. I remember going down, I couldn't sleep at night and go down to the lake because we only lived a block from Lake Huron. I remember wandering into the lake one night. It was late. I got up. I think I wandered in the lake about 2 in the morning. And it was dark. My eyes weren't quite focused yet for the dark. And I went and wandered into the lake, and I'm sitting there in the lake trying to get my core temperature down. And then as my eyes started to focus, I figured I was the only one out there. And as my eyes started to focus, it looked like a bunch of seals bobbing around out there. There was that many people sitting down there in the water 2 o'clock in the morning trying to chill down. So yeah, it was damn hot. But we had the ocean currents and the solar maximums, or solar maximum, whatever they call that, lined up on top of each other. So exacerbated the heating. And but it had nothing to do. It has absolutely nothing to do with man. Absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with man. Nothing. And we just been hoodwinked by the people that want to control the planet. And we have to get over that. We got to understand we are being massively frauded. That's what we got to come to terms with. Now we're being invaded in the West, not by climate change, but by a religious change, I guess you would call it, with the influx of the Muslims and Islam. They just put this crap together at the international level, and they take a run at us with it. It's what they do. That's what they've always done. You know, it's all about control, plain and simple control. Now they control all the weed, or they're going to. And that came out of the international realm. And so you're going to have to deal with that as well. You know, I saw an article that you know, with the breweries and the distilleries and that they were all private, and they wanted control. Who wanted control? Like the Rockefellers and the boys, Carnegie, Ford, and a myriad of others. And so I saw an article where they actually went out and poisoned independent liquor and killed a bunch of people, i.e. a false flag, and they're still doing it today. They've always been doing it. And then they went on a safety campaign that, you know, because of these deaths, because of the liquor, we need to regulate it, tax it, control it, and anybody that would touch or brew independent liquor obviously is a threat to society, of which we're going to have to come down on hard. Just the way they do things. They did the same thing with the milk in about the same time frame. And they did the same thing. They allowed a bunch of people to die, and then went on a safety campaign that they needed to pasteurize all the milk because raw milk is will kill you. But that was connected to the breweries. They knew what was going on in Chicago, New York, Toronto, Montreal, where the breweries were, and they had cattle or cows in barns right beside the breweries, and apparently from history, these things were absolute pigsties. They were feeding them the used mash or whatever you call it from the breweries, and they called it swill milk. They didn't call it raw milk. They didn't even call it milk. They called it swill milk. It was that freaking bad. The conditions were that bad. It was poison. And they killed a bunch of people. The government knew these swill houses were there. But it's a good mechanism to get what they want. So another false flag on your milk, a false flag on your liquor, and so on and so forth. And the global warming is a false flag. And we got to come to terms with this. The migrant movement, the refugee movement is definitely a humongous false flag. And these people are really sick. I mean, they are amoral psychopaths, psychopaths, I guess. And they will do whatever it takes for them to get control of everything on an international scale. And this is absolutely no good for anything. Now, then we got to step up to the plate. We got to call these people out for everything bad that they've ever done, which is continuous. And the sad part is we fund them. We fund the universities. We fund the scientists. We fund the politicians. We fund the teachers. We fund it all. And they're running around accusing you of being detrimental to the earth. We got to get rid of 80% of the if you haven't read this, I'm going to post this in here. If you haven't read this, I do recommend, there's some links at the bottom of this Why Our Winters Are Getting Warmer that you can punch on. It'll give you more information. But the fact is, the earth is cyclical. It's always been cyclical, and it will always be cyclical. They tell you they got to charge you a carbon tax. Why? Because you live here. But like, how much damage it is you do to the earth again? What's that? None. That's what I figured. None. Zero. But the government that tells you you have to give up everything and preferably die, they have no qualms about bombing the snot out of the planet. These must be green bombs, I guess. I don't know. Maybe when these bombs go off, they actually reduce CO2 somehow. Not likely. The same mouthpieces are telling you on one hand you can't use water and you can't use fuel and you can't have a private car and private property is not sustainable and yaddy friggin' yaddy yeah. Have no qualms about dropping bombs all over the place. And I don't get where people don't get these connections. They just seem to, whatever, listen to whatever is thrown at them. It's okay, we have to bomb because we have to make lots of migrants because, the West was founded on Christian values. And we don't like that because we're satanic and we got to get rid of you guys. So we're going to bomb the snot out of the Muslims. And then we'll make a whole bunch of, millions and millions and millions of refugees. And then we're going to swarm your nations. And your nations are going to open the door willingly to us. Because they're all part of the program, because your country's a member state of the United Nations, was a satanic organization who wants to take over the friggin' world and destroy the planet, which you're doing a pretty good job of. But as far as the good men and women who call this planet home, have you ever met an anti-environmentalist? Have you ever met someone that gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to destroy this world, I'm going to turn on all the taps and let them run all day, and I'm going to carry around a chainsaw. If I see a tree looking at me crooked, I'm going to cut it down, the son of a bitch. I was offended by that tree. I cut it down. There's not what's going on. Not what's going on at all. It's just propaganda. It's bullshit. And it's time people get with the program. Every school board should be sued. If there's anybody that should be sued, it should be the school boards. Because they're the ones that have their hands on the children. They're the ones that are filling their head full of the garbage. Now, the teachers and school board might say, well, we're mandated to do this because this is the curriculum. That's the excuse of, I'm just doing my job, which doesn't fly. That doesn't fly at all. I think what we need to do is inform the school board that what they're doing is absolutely wrong, and if they don't cease and desist, then we shall sue their personal asses into the ground under the Director's Liability Handbook. You can't hide behind, I'm just doing my job. You can't do it. And international law states you can't do it. And again, I have about as much use for international law as I do for scientists. None, because the international law supersedes the law of your nation, and therefore you don't have a nation. And that's bad. So, but I really do believe that we should just sue the living snot out of every school board that there is, because the school board, it's my little kid's first day of school. They're going to kindergarten today, and they're going to learn stuff. And no, they're going to learn anything. They're going to be pumped full of needles, and they're going to be pumped full of propaganda. So you took this perfectly normal child and you gave it over to the school board, whose job is to destroy your child physically and mentally. And it's against the law to do harm. But this is conspiracy to do harm. These people are destined to destroy your children. And you put them into schools. That makes no sense. You can't even make sense out of that. I saw a thing about measles. Apparently, we eradicated measles back in whatever year. Doesn't matter the year. Through some vaccinations and stuff. And then the question was, well, if we eradicated measles, then why are measles back? Oops. Simple. Again, knowledge is power. It's the same as this global warming nonsense. Knowledge is power. We know the Earth cycle, so we know when we're going to get superheat. And we'll just not sell. We won't sell it as a normal cycle. We'll sell it as, oh my God, too many people on the planet, wrecking the planet, too much CO2 on the planet. CO2, of course, being a life gas. And the United Nations and their satanic groups are death cults. So it only makes sense what they're doing, because it is a death cult. The environmental movement is a death cult. The United Nations is the head of the death cult. These people are amoral. They're sick people. But they go, measles is back. Why is measles back? Well, I read some reports from, well, I don't know when the hell that was, long time. Oh, the polio problem. When I was studying vaccines a little bit, actually, I spent a long time digging with that stuff. But the fact of the matter is that these are viruses. They're viruses, which means simply that they raise their ugly head and they come in relatively strong. That's why children get the childhood diseases, to give them a strong immunity later on in life if they need it. It's natural. But that polio deal, I think it was Poland who didn't vaccinate against polio. And they have a chart from when where they were giving vaccinations, and the chart, see that the polio went up and then it went down. This is a natural cycle of a virus. And it's forever changing. The idea you can stick a needle in somebody's arm and prevent something that's never the same is ludicrous, to say the best. But when you put the two charts together, where they didn't vaccinate and where they did vaccinate, the charts are freaking identical. The virus came in the same in the vaccinated area as it did in the non-vaccinated area, and it dissipated and died off. The same thing. You can put those charts, boom, boom, right on top of each other. They're identical. Again, science sucks, and the people that control the science should all be basically hung, and because they are destroying everybody's lives. Anyways, all universities should be sued. Anything that's got to do with education be sued, because it's false. It's all false. I mean, I saw an article somewhere in the States that they want to run the right wingers out of the universities. I guess the universities thought they were all left wing, all Marxists now, but there's still the odd, ugly rearing of a head to tell them some reality, and they don't want to hear about it. They're that close. They're that close now to getting us. And I'm a firm believer they ain't going to get us, because we're going to push them back, and we're going to push them out, and we're going to regain our nations. And any politician that ain't on side, well, you're going to the hoosegow, buddy, or worse. I've had enough of your nonsense. And I just want to say that, you know, it's not one of the reasons I do this. I do this because I'm supposed to be doing this. But, you know, one guy, I've interviewed a lot of people over the years, but the one guy that really sticks in my mind is George Hunt. George Washington Hunt. A perfectly normal American man who went through school and was taught what he was taught and went in the Marines or whatever he was in, served his country, started a business, and then had his whole life changed when he went to that Wilderness Congress meeting in Denver, Colorado, looking to schmooze with some people, looking to get a job in forestry or whatever for his son. And his life changed because it was supposed to change. And he didn't go there and see these people, Rothschild, Evelyn de Rothschild, and Morris Strong, David Rockefeller there, and he wasn't impressed by them. He wondered what in the hell they were doing there, which led him to do some research on the subject, which totally basically changed and destroyed his life for him, because then he became a conspiracy theorist, and he was digging and digging and digging and digging. It was much harder back then, pre-real internet days, and did some very wonderful work and some good films. And the last time I interviewed George, you know, he was tired, getting old. And, you know, he said, I don't think we can beat them, Ron, because they're too far ahead. He said, I spent all that time from 87 on just trying to light sparks and hopefully get enough sparks that would go to a small flame, and then we could burn this nonsense out of here. But I think it's too late. And I just told George, you know, I said, you've been at this forever, right? And we're going to beat them. Because now I see young kids are looking at your videos from way back when and go, this guy nailed this. So they are waking up slowly, and we will beat them back. And at the end of that show, I was so happy to hear George say, you know what, Ron? We will beat them. And that's the attitude that's got to be taken. Unfortunately, George died shortly thereafter. But his memory lives on, and his videos live on. And, yeah, we just got to strengthen our spirit, our spines, and our minds, and stand up, say no, had enough of this shit, and we win. If we don't, we lose. So win or lose, it's our choice. And I highly suggest we win, because we know what the downside is if we lose. So, anyways, rock the snot out of the boat anytime you can. Keep teaching, talking, and telling people what you know. And in another
selling lies and buying time, killing people next in line, lower classes,
take everybody, we're out of here for now.
Sick from water, sick from air, making money, they don't care. Caesar shit, force of air, fuck them back, it's only for them.
Thank you, Jules, and everybody for the time on this
they master Cobain, they burn the kids, no one makes countries lie to your face, fight and die, cause God forgives.
My name is S.M. Gibson, and I am the host of Anti-Media